Merry Christmas, Italiano.
Yes, you gotta get right up close.
Hey Zoe.
Nice to have a dentist.
Hey Zoe. Hey Zoe.
I'm sorry.
Persimmon, that was good. Put that on, you know, this end by the appetizer.
Okay.
That's good.
That's pretty good.
Just to cover it,
And you're gonna put that in the oven.
I just make suggestions, and what happens to my suggestions is I have a wonderful, wonderful, wonderful group of people who just do it, and
Or they tell you you're full of nonsense.
yeah, they tell me I'm full of nonsense. And it's the people that are here, it's the people that are here every Saturday that make this work. It's the people that are here on the not Saturdays to make it work. This was a challenge, you know. We'll talk about a few things. This was a challenge because we never expected this to be here. This flood business that we had earlier in the year. It was never disclosed because probably the people that were here had never had the problem. The gentleman next door has been there 10 years, and he has, when he moved in, they have offices there. They have carpets in their basement, and they never had a problem in 10 years except for this year. This year they had the same problem we did. So they're putting in the sump, they're doing the whole deal. The concrete floor in here was 117 years old. It was very thin in places, it was cracked, it was very thick in other places, not uniform, and it was allowing water to seep up through it.
Wasn't it just sitting right on top of sand, the
Yeah.
basic,
Yeah, there was nothing under it, no rebar.
Yeah.
So what we did is we took the old concrete out and we went down probably a foot or more, and then we put in what they call finger drains, which are 4-inch PVC pipes with holes in them that are wrapped in fabric. And there's one running under this table, there's one running down the middle, and there's one running out by the wall here. We have clean outs in the back, little bronze plates that we can take off every year and flush out the finger drains. The drains also run up around here. They run into a new sump, and the new sump is deeper than any of our other sumps, and it is active. It is picking up groundwater and it's pumping. So everything you see is new here. The walls have been sandblasted. As Mike said, we're down to finishes here. And what probably is going to happen is a wood look vinyl on the floor, because we're just concerned about putting any wood downstairs here. The walls that are not brick will have a wooden beadboard or wainscot, just like we have upstairs in the big room with a chair rail, and that'll go all around every wall here. And the ceiling, for our plans right now, we're looking at a sheetrock ceiling that's made for studios, and it's acoustic already. It's got the holes in it, so it'll look very nice here with, you know, contrasting with everything we have in the room. The office is going there. In the front we have a new up and down stairway, and we have a handicap lift going in. So the lift will take 750 pounds.
Incidentally, it's heavier than any radio I think we have to move.
Anyway, we're going to save our backs carrying stuff up and down the stairs from now on. People that have been involved in this project, too many to name, but I'll try. It all started the beginning of the year when we were soliciting funds to work upstairs in the great room and on the radio control room up there. And then the flood came along. And our $50,000, and we asked for help, and people came through, and our $50,000 went up, And at the end of this year, thanks to our last $50,000 donation from Mr. Staples, we have raised almost $250,000 for this project. And it shows the willingness of people to give when they know where it's going and it's going to the right place and we're doing the right thing. Every cent, as it stands now, and nobody draws a salary here, every cent that's donated goes into the museum, into the facility, into the upkeep of this place. So we are blessed that way. We don't have to skimp on what we do. As Mike Adams said when we first moved in here, we're going to try to do everything the best way we can. And that's happening. We're learning along the way. We make a few mistakes. We correct them, but we move on. And so we've got this new floor, a brand new driveway outside that's sloped down the middle, and the water will run away from, any rainwater will run away from the building.
And you should have, there's new drains under the sidewalk to take it across the
Yeah.
sidewalk into the street
Right.
as the town requires.
This main pump and two backup pumps that are down in this sump here pump into a collection tank above that's in the driveway, and from the collection tank that gives it enough height to then drain down, go under the front garden, under the sidewalk and into the street. A 4-inch pipe goes down and it converts to 2 or inch-and-a-half pipes that come out, and it's working perfectly. The pump installation is Walter Hayden and Robert Schwartz and Cliff Farwell. And Cliff Farwell is building our office for us, and so far has done a very fine job. John Stewart has been, is he here? John Stewart's not here, but John Stewart has been the one that, he's the guy that draws and makes all the plans for us. And he makes the full-size ones that we submit to the city. He's got the programs, he's learned, he's got the knowledge of how to do this, and we've been blessed that we have a draftsman. And John also is our sort of systems manager here. We have a system we actually have on the pumps. The pumps are actually battery backup. There's 2 of them, and they're in a control box, and somebody will be called. There's a telephone calls that will go out if the backup pumps fail and there's a problem. So we are really, really covered as far as that. It's people that make this organization, and we need to celebrate those people. I have some bad news, and let's get it over with now. If any of you remember our good friend Bob Beckman from Sacramento, Bob and Rich Beckman always used to be our gatekeepers at KRE, and they were here last year at our holiday party, and sad to say, the 19th of last month, Bob passed away unexpectedly, and he was probably in his late 50s or very early 60s. He was a good man, and we will miss him. The other thing is Larry Dries is now in in a nursing facility to sort of get his strength back after his last round of chemo. So Larry is hanging in there.
Expected to get out.
Expected to come out of his skilled nursing. Yeah. So we want to thank Norman. We want to thank John and Mike and Scott and Jamie and Tom and where are they? And Philip, wherever he is. And Denny, I'm getting there. Oh, by the way, Denny, everybody say happy birthday, Denny! How old are you, Denny?
I'm not saying. 66.
Pardon me?
66.
Oh, you caught up to me.
Yeah, you're a couple of months.
A couple, yeah.
Whippersnappers.
Or I would say you look pretty good for 73. So. So it's Denny's birthday. What else do I have to say? I had a list yesterday. Yeah.
I was just remembering a meeting 4 years ago. You were talking to us all at KRE, and the mood was not as upbeat. You remember? Yeah, but you did finish that with a, well, we found this place and we're talking to the sellers.
And here we are, and it's our place, and we can hang as many crazy lights in here as we want, and nobody will stop us. And
as many radios as we want.
And as many radios.
That will stop.
It'll fit, I mean.
Yeah, and again, it's the people that sort of are making this place happen, and it does happen. And people like, look who's here. Don Petty's here, and let me introduce none of this, none of what we are doing here. None of you would be here today. This building wouldn't be here. None of this would have happened without that man there. And that's Jim Cerner, and he is one of the founding members of CHRS. Thank you, Jim. So, see what your little group turned into?
Founders get grips under the floor.
There are other things I'm supposed to say, but I can't remember them now. But thank you all for coming. And Bart has now it's award time. I forgot. Bart's got something for me to do.
There are more seats over here if
You're
anybody
making
wants
me
to sit
wait,
down.
buddy.
There are more seats. People come by. We got about 3 more seats.
3 more seats, and we'll make more. So in the beginning, all radio was long-wave radio. The radio spectrum now extends almost to red light. But long-wave radio was the cradle of radio, and down in the long waves, very, very low frequency. Lots of interesting things still vibrate the ether. A few years ago, we, CHRS, wanted to honor the ancient Swedish long-wave mechanical alternator station, SAQ. From that quest evolved the VLF interest group, an ongoing program of CHRS. Keep away from the food, Zoe, or I'll make hamburgers out of you. Members of that group have now published several related articles in the journal and did original VLF research during the eclipse. So to recognize the work of the CHRS VLF interest group, we present these commendations, and I'll read the whole list, and some of them are not here, to Gilles Verneau, John Stewart, John Staples, Paul Shin, Scott Robinson, and Bart Lee. And this one goes to John Staples. Congratulations. Okay. And yesterday, a group that we worked very closely with, the Broadcast Legends, you know, they have 4 luncheons a year, and we provide the programming for 2 of their luncheons every year. And some of our members are members of that organization and directors in that organization. And yesterday, where is he? I don't see him. Yesterday, Len Shapiro was recognized as the Broadcast Legends Legend of the Year. So come on up, Len, and get your plaque again. As Len presented me my plaque last year because I missed the lunch, I'm going to present it to him this year because I missed the lunch yesterday because I was here working. Congratulations, Len. Okay. Does anybody have any questions? Anything I can answer? Anything you want to know about what we're doing, where we're going? I have some, as Denny said, the last meeting, 4 years ago, I ended with some important news. I have some important news. We have a contractor, and some of you will realize how important that is. We've selected a contractor, and he can start on this project within 1 to 2 weeks. The only holdup now is our plans that are still being worked on by our structural engineer, and bless his heart, we love him, he works for us pro bono, so we can't push him. So he's got the plans now, and once they're done and submitted, we will get on to this and finish this project. Vincent, yes. Any questions?
Two
Yes.
things I'd like to say. One is about Vincent. If anybody here has a need for a structural engineer, you should get his contact information from Steve. I think it's a kindness to him to return business to him if he meets the needs of your project. I'm doing that right now with a friend at work. The second thing is, Steve puts in a lot of time and effort here, and I am, wow.
Thanks, everybody. I do it because, it's my passion, and I like it, and I want to see us, make a mark here. We are trying to preserve a part of our culture that soon will be forgotten and is already being forgotten in many ways.
It won't be forgotten, not freaking out.
Well, it's not going to be forgotten because of us.
Yeah.
And that's the mark I want to leave, is to be sure that radio history gets preserved. Did I mention your name in the thanks?
You did.
All right, very good. I'm just checking. And thanks to everybody for every moment that they put in here, especially the Saturday guys, the Scotts and the Hills. They are here every Saturday working their butts off, and Walter and Robert and Cliff come in during the week, and it's a good thing. And I love what we're doing, and it's all positive, and it's a positive attitude that we're going to for the future. This looks like a lot of food, but we have some great technical stuff happening before that. And did you have an introduction?
I'll go last.
You're going to go last.
I just want to say one thing.
Go ahead, Mike.
Yeah, one thing, I know we recognize some of our donors, but when we were trying to buy this building, we needed a considerable amount of money to close the deal. Same when we were fixing it down here, we needed a large amount of money. One person came through both times, Norman Leal. You may not know him, but thank you, Norman.
Thank you, Norman.
He's our number one donor, and we really appreciate that because you saved us.
We could not have done this without you.
Without.
Thank you.
Good to know. Thanks, Steve. Couldn't do it without you either.
Well, it takes a lot of people, a lot of people to stir the pot and stir it right and do it. And, we work well, everybody works well together here, whatever they do. Every relationship with another person here, whether it be work or social or whatever, or fundraising, we all work well together because we all want the same thing. So, who's going to be first in the demos? Demos? Denny? Let's go. We'll have Denny first.
Not really a demo, kind of a show and tell.
That's fine.
A year ago, we did this for the first time. We had a really good, I think, selection of interesting stuff. And we're going to keep doing it because it's a good way for people to bring in things that just kind of have a story behind them. So, this was spontaneous on my part because at the last swap meet, I found something. And like a lot of things we find, we bring them home and then we kind of study them a little more and then we discover there's a story behind it. So, this item here looks like any other piece of, test equipment, maybe like a generator or something. The brand is Konar. Anybody know what that brand is? Some people have heard about it. It's a little bit obscure. It turns out this is the brand that was created by National Radio Institute. Now that rings a bell. NRI? Right, so more on this later. Let's talk about NRI. So NRI was a correspondence school. And from the very early days of radio. They started in, take a guess.
1925. 20?
Earlier.
1918.
Earlier.
1917.
Earlier. It's 1914. So 1914, before we entered World War I, here's a school set up by a high school teacher who decided the best way to teach people is hands-on. So first he had a real building, and he taught people in Washington, D.C. His name was James Smith. And in fact, here's his picture. I'll start passing some of this around. And so I'm sure you've seen ads like
Yeah,
this.
sure. And you see
Okay,
him,
you see, because they ran these ads for a long
yeah, and you see him
time.
age.
Yeah, full page stuff, you know. Learn radio repair in your spare time. So he ran a correspondence course because he found out this was the best business. You know, don't pay rent, you know, train by mail. So you usually got a kit, and the kit might have been a radio or a TV. You know, in this case, you built this this radio here. So we can start this going around.
Yeah.
And he did a pretty good business. He said you could earn $50 to $250 a week.
Back then, that was good.
Back then, I mean, this is a
Multiply that
picture
20
from
times.
like 1930 or something like that. It's pretty good deal. He says you can be a radio expert. You can learn quickly and at home. So this was really catching on. You circulate that
I guess
one.
the universities really didn't have a curriculum for electronics in those days, and so.
Yeah, and this was very hands-on. It
It's
really
schools.
supported technicians and repair people more than anything else. So these ads just kept running and running. And then when TV came along, sure enough, you know, you could also learn how to service TVs. And there was always a coupon to send for a free booklet. Okay, they didn't tell you how much the course cost, but you could get a free booklet. And then they hit you up on the course. So we'll start this one. If you pick up any old magazine, you'll run across it. You can be your own boss. You can be your own boss. One of those ads talks about the romance of radio repair. And any of you that have worked on a decrepit old radio will understand.
So
Pass
you
that
have to
along.
have a good vocabulary, selective profanity. That
Yes. And sometimes they had to work hard to get your attention, you know, so some of them were done in comic book style.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, so they tell a little story about discovering NRI, sending away from the material, and then being successful. So successful, that in the end, you get the girl.
This is 30s.
You absolutely get the girl.
It's like during the Depression, when people were hard.
So you got these pamphlets, that's what it was all about, together with the kit that you put together. And we'll start these going
We have some
around.
actual, in the library, we have.
And then, if you're really interested in the nuts and bolts, here's a list of all the materials they taught you. And they did teach a lot of things. In fact, they got into more and more stuff as the years went on. They got into avionics and marine, and they did VCRs, and then they actually dabbled in early computers, believe it or not. How late do you think this business kept going?
1990.
70s.
2002. Wow. I didn't know that. I figured he was dead by the 80s. But no, they kept going. And finally, what killed him was you just don't fix anything anymore.
Yeah,
It's a
yeah.
throwaway world. They weren't the only ones doing correspondence courses. There were others out there. I found this very interesting one that, God, I wish they were still in business. This guy would teach you how to hypnotize using your TV set. And so this girl obviously has no idea that she's been totally hypnotized and walking straight into the arms. So anyway, so back to this, to finish the story. This is a ham radio transmitter.
Oh, okay.
So, it was part of the set. It was a receiver and a transmitter. Use the exact same case as their test equipment. They started their Konar brand in 1962. And you could get that without the correspondence. Their equipment was apparently desirable. Although we don't see a lot of it here. So anyway, for $64, you got the kit for this, you got the kit for the receiver, and you got the chorus, and you too could be a ham.
How many watts?
Start out. So this little transmitter puts out about 10 watts from a single tube.
606.
Code.
No, 6DQ6 sweep tube. Okay. This is the most, I restored this, it's the most pathetic operating transmitter. And it was built by somebody who had no idea how to solder. I had to completely rebuild it. But anyway, be that as it may, that's what they did. So we'll start this one around.
Very good.
And that's my story. NRI.
Danny Bart's
The library has a pretty close to complete collection of the NRI instructional books from, I think, the 40s. And we also have other correspondence courses. And we're willing to lend them out to people so they can learn how to fix radio.
Do you have the correspondence course on hypnotizing young women?
I'm not.
We don't have an HR department, I can say that.
Thank you, Danny. Before we get on to Mike, I was standing down there and I forgot to mention our regular weekend guys. Mike and Bob and Jimmy and Kenneth and Arden and Bart are also, and Kent are also, and Vern are also, and Dave are also our great weekend. And recently Steve was our regular weekend crew. And we got a really good group of them. And Seth, and we can't forget about Seth, and I want to make special mention to Seth. He is a dynamo. He fixes the radios that our collectors don't want, and we've been selling them as fast as we can fix them to millennials and young people who want an antique in their homes, like we have back here. And so, you know, the things we grew up with are now antiques to the millennials. And I heard something very interesting. Very young children today do not know what a knob is or how to deal with a knob. They don't know that you can turn a knob and have it do something. Everything is push and touch. So we're trying to keep it alive, and thanks to all you guys who bust your butts here every weekend.
Thank you.
And
Staff has a soldering gun in his hand right now as we speak.
And so, when you see Seth, thank him for all he's done for us. He's really a dynamo, and he's really produced a spark. And when we go out to these shows to Alameda or Treasure Island or something, there is genuine excitement in our booth for people that want to come up and buy radios that we wouldn't even touch. So for our collection.
But they want to hear our story.
Yeah.
There's a lab we're preserving it.
Backstory about Seth. When he was a kid growing up in Tennessee, for a while his parents made their living selling stuff. I think it was marbles, actually.
Marbles,
at
yes.
flea markets. And so he sort of got used to the notion of being around that kind of a selling environment. And this just fell naturally to him. He started going to the Alameda flea market, and it just built it from there.
Yeah, and we've done very well, so. Now we'll go to Mr. Mike Adams, our chairman, who will talk about his radio camera.
Okay, I want to take a few minutes of your time. You notice I'm wearing a radio camera, or is it a camera radio? I'm not really sure which, but it is a camera, not a very good one, and the radio probably is a decent radio, although I don't have a battery for it. Now, the question I want to ask you, and first of all, let me pass this around if you want. Billboard magazine from August 1948, there is an ad for this radio, which says it is $28.50. So because I collect cameras and radios, I wanted this in my collection. Now, let me ask this question. How many of you have camera radios?
Yeah, we do. We all do. We all do.
Okay. Let me
I have a Samsung camera radio.
Please. Let me suggest something here because it's KCBS All News, right? It's also a very good. There it is. That's radio. So this is a radio camera, and you all have one.
And television.
And it's got a television and a movie projector.
It's everything.
I can't get rid of it, wait a minute.
Because it doesn't have a knob.
Anyway, radio's
Yeah, where's the knobs?
So, this is a box camera, which was glued into the front of this. A reflex box camera, you see. Uses 127 film, which by unscrewing this thing, you actually load it. It is a fixed focus, fixed aperture, fixed speed. So you have to be like outside in more or less moderate sunshine to get a 127 picture of this. So it really is kind of a
16
problem.
exposure, that has
Now,
to
if you look at the back of the radio, there are 4 tubes in here. It's a good radio. I have a schematic, which I downloaded off the internet. Anybody want to see the schematic? All right, there you go. Now, this is what I would call an all-American 5. And the reason, that first tube, of course, the rectifier tube that takes the household current and changes it from AC into DC to be filtered and power the tubes. This only works on batteries, but the 4 tubes are the useful tubes that a AA5 would have. So it actually is a pretty good radio. Now, if I could open up the back here, which I have to unscrew, you would find inside a place for a 67.5 volt and a 1.5 volt battery for filament. And for high voltage, a 67.5 volts, put it on your tongue, you wouldn't even get shocked.
How heavy is that thing with the battery in it?
It must be awfully heavy. It's pretty heavy right now. So there is the tuning dial. There is the station selector and the variable capacitor. And it's actually, it looks clean. I don't know if anybody wants to see it before I
Is there a
put it
loop
together.
wound
Sure.
into the cabinet or
Pass it
something?
around.
So
What's
Mike,
that?
who
The
would
loop
buy something
antenna.
like
There
that?
must be a loop. Well, I don't.
Who would
Yeah,
buy
so here's
that?
the wire. Wound inside.
I think a bird watcher who wants to go out in the woods and commune with nature and take the occasional picture, but not miss the ball game.
Oh, okay.
Or listen to the Jack Benny program and bird watching and take pictures at the
I
same
have a
time.
question. Can you explain why your battery tube radio, when you turn it on and it's got tubes, it will almost come on almost instantly, yet an AC radio takes time to heat up? What's the difference
Well,
there?
I will refer to Scott, who is our shop
The
guy.
difference is that,
The filament
like
tube.
very early radios, where the filament was directly heated, the thing that gives off electrons, makes the radio work, was directly heated. The piece of wire you ran the current through that glows red, and it warms up very quickly. It's convenient for various reasons that the cathode not be connected to the filament power supply. And so later on, they make a tube and put some resistance heaters inside it, and it's getting the heat from that into the tube that takes long, but you don't make battery radios that way because they use way more power. These are, it's a filament down the middle like the early ones.
Okay. And while I was thinking about this and doing this, I've been thinking about exhibits for upstairs. You know, little kind of exhibits that people can see and understand. I want to make an exhibit called Swiss Army Radio, and I want to take all the radios we have, and I've got a few at home that do more than just provide radio, that have other things. I have a radio horse, which is very nice, and I have a Majestic Melody Cruiser, which is a combination boat and radio. So I thought, you know, maybe we can do something later.
This has a radio in it too.
Okay, Swiss Army Radio, there you go. That's what I thought. Okay.
So those of you who worked on radios know the name Miller. Built probably most of the IF transformers.
Speak up,
Company that built most of the coils and IF transformers and radios that many of us have repaired.
And is still in business.
Yeah. What's they've become nowadays, not making IF transformers anymore. Anyway, this was sold as a kit, or you could get it already factory wired. It's a pre-selector, so that your shortwave radio that you wanted to listen to stations from around the world would actually pick them up better. It's got two 6D6 pentodes in it. It tunes all of the shortwave bands up to nearly 30 megahertz. And this is the documentation. I'll pass it around for everybody to take a look at the original. Just right down here. And additional notes to this.
Can you have the-
Close-up look, I'll bring it over to them.
Yeah, can you face the, I would like to see, will you see the chassis? Can
Yeah,
you
sure.
tip it over? Tip it up. Oh, very beautiful, very nice.
Anybody else want a close look?
External cars.
So it has,
Or
okay.
AC.
Yep, built-in AC supply.
Old AC.
Anything else you wanna say about it, Irv?
Anybody got any
That's
questions?
the band.
How well does it work? Works very well, I recapped it obviously.
Okay, so it's got like 3 ranges. 3 ranges.
So we can pass it around, and since the food is here, and we have two more demonstrations, let's get that going. Where's Chris? Is he here?
Yeah.
Come on.
All right,
About what he has done.
what have you got here?
So I think a lot of you know what this is here, but this is my very nice HRO, and some of you maybe haves. And this is a very nice set. This is found on the later models. And I bought it at a swap meet over at the CHRS parking lot a couple of last summer, and it works quite well. I got it with all the original coils. It's very nice push-pull tuning coils right here, and each one has a certain amount of frequency. This one goes from 7 to 14.4 megacycles, and I have
No hertz.
and I also have the complete set of coils with the original boxes, which are actually made out of the old packaging cases the company made them out of.
And you recapped it and all that stuff.
Someone already has recapped it, actually, as part of someone else's collection. It works very well, and I've actually been receiving quite a few people working on networks with this. It's very nice. You can take a look if you want. What's funny is it mainly uses metal tubes, but there's one glass tube. If you take a look, it has a metal protector around it. It's very good quality.
The famous dial. Tell me.
Yeah, it's very nice. It's the,
Well, they stuck with that dial for decades.
yeah. This is from the later models. The earliest models had a shiny metal around here, where this one's shiny black instead of the shiny silver.
Hey, Chris,
Yeah?
can you tell us how you got interested in radio?
Well, I had a school project actually, and I had I decided to build a radio.
What kind?
So, just a little crystal set.
Okay.
I got a video
In
online.
science class, or?
It was a design your own homework project, and I was interested in that. So I went to Anchor Electronics. Some of you probably know about that, Anchor Electronics. I went there, did parts, and I heard about HSC Electronics, which some of you will probably also know about. And I went there, and I had a good friend of mine, Bob Ellingston, a good friend of mine, who was quite a collector. And I was interested in radio, and he began to help me repair a little wooden barn set from the 1940s, which my mom used to own. Though I still haven't repaired that, I haven't gotten around to replacing all the caps.
Pass
But I began to get interested, and I bought a reel-to-reel, and then a little bit later I went to a big warehouse sale where they're clearing out their old warehouse, and I got a little Hallicrafters S38A, and that's really how I got started.
How old are you? Now?
I'm 13, I'll be 14 though very soon. Actually, I'm 14 right now.
Hey, Chris, where did you get that Hallicrafters t-shirt? That is so cool.
I got that online, it's very nice.
Oh, right, you got it online, oh, okay.
It's called the HRO. He specializes in it. It's very nice.
Okay.
Thank you, Chris.
Thank you, great. John Staples is next, where are you, John?
We're going to show you in 1929 scanning this TV, which is quite spectacular. John started off in radio at a small 1 kilowatt FM, and then 3 summers at WJJD in Chicago, a 50,000 watt directional in the early 60s. He obtained an amateur extra license and first phone with radar endorsement in 1958. John holds ham call W6DM and also W6CF as trustee for the CHRS ham station, which is in that closed room down at the end. We haven't built it yet. He restored the Western Electric 23C and Gates Dualux boards, as well as his own Collins 212A. You can see upstairs in the raised area, you can see the Western Electric board. It's beautiful. Restored several BC transmitters, including a 1938 Collins 20K and RCA BTA-IR. 1R. Restored many television receivers, including the CHS 30-inch Dumont Royal Sovereign, which is out in the hall. designed and built a working mechanical display and working iconoscope camera. And John, of course, is at rocket science. He has been a physicist at Lawrence Berkeley National Laboratory since 1971. Smartest guy in the room, John Stegel.
Thanks, Michael. I'm going to tell you about this guy that we came into possession recently. How many people even knew there was mechanical television? Really? Okay. How many people knew there was mechanical television before today? Really? That's amazing because most of the people I talk to say, what's that? So what I'm going to tell you about right here, I hope everybody can see this screen. Michael, I hope I don't. But one of our members, Alan Voorhees, is he here?
No.
'Cause I have never met the man.
He's in the Philippines now.
That's where he is? I'd love to, you know.
Yeah, he lives in the Philippines. He moved there last week.
He got out of town. He found this in
A friend of Alan Voorhees runs a car wash in San Leandro. And when the guy bought the car wash, there was another building or a house behind it. And so he bought the whole property and the people said, just keep this thing. And this thing sat in the office of the car wash for 20 years maybe. And Alan came across it and got the gentleman to give it to the club, to the society, on long-term loan.
Long-term loan.
That thing is huge too, it's about as tall as I am.
This is a really unique, valuable piece of equipment. So I'm going to go tell you what it is.
Excuse me, and the cabinet right now is being refinished by Philip and his wonderful, skilled assistant, Carlos.
It's now in 18 pieces.
Oh my goodness.
This is all going to go, all that mechanism is going to go back into the cabinet. Anyway, let's go back to 1929. And it turns out that television back in 1929 was very popular. There were a number of magazines that came out monthly all about television. Television around 1929, 1930 was about the same as radio, in the very early 20s, where kids were making their crystal sets. Kids were now making televisions. All they needed was with a motor and a disc
And a radio.
and a radio that received these stations, and these stations were being broadcast in the standard broadcast band, not the high frequencies. And
Low
so
resolution.
there were kits, and people could buy stuff cheaply and put these things together. So here's how it works. At the transmitter end, there is a rotating disc that has these little, spiral set of holes in them. There'll be a light source that'll go through this disc and bathe the subject in this scanning light source. You can imagine just sitting in front of this thing is going to be playing in your face like that. And then there's a bunch of photocells that pick up that light that's coming off the subject. That is the video. And these things, these things are scanning typically 30 lines of scan, that's all. You know, our old analog TV system that we don't have anymore, that was a 525 line scan, 60 or 30 frames, 60 fields a second. This was 12 fields a second and 30 lines. So you see the resolution on these things was terrible. And that's the state of the art about 1927, 1928, 29. By 1929, the VisionNet came along with a little bit higher resolution. So the video was then transmitted over to the receiver, and the receiver had the same thing. It had a motor that ran in synchronism with the motor at the sending end, had the same kind of disc with the same kind of spiral in it, and the signal from these photocells is transmitted through the radio and lights this neon lamp. And this neon lamp is flashing in synchronism to how this light ray is scanning the subject. So it is a real video signal that's transmitted to the neon light. The wheel here scans this large aperture neon light, and they're very rare, and this thing actually came with one. It's right here. It's called a Kino lamp. And here's what it looks like. And I don't want to pass this around because this thing, first of all, is worth a fortune.
And it's fragile.
And it's very fragile. It's
And
actually,
they don't make them anymore.
They certainly don't make them anymore.
That's a neon bulb, right?
This is a
John?
neon bulb.
Was this bulb made specifically for this television? or
Yep,
did they
it was
use
made,
some-
the Kino lamp was made for all the TVs, all the different TVs that
At
were
the
being
time.
sold back at that time.
Okay.
So this was it was a hot item called a Kino lamp. The manufacturers sort of had the market on these Kino lamps, so they were very, very common back then, but today it's a real rare and expensive little thing. So I'm gonna put that right here. So that's the principle of operation. You have a driving motor at one end, you have a motor at the other end, hill.
It's also important that the receiver and the transmitter are on the same AC grid.
Let me
So
get
that
to
the-
that.
Okay, I didn't, that they, so they were
Let me
synchronized.
get to that.
They didn't have the
Okay,
same-
you're running ahead of me.
Okay, I didn't know.
Okay, so here is this scanning disc and this spiral of holes. It starts either at the outside or the inside. And as this thing rotates, you get the various lines of scan. And the number of lines of scan is the number of holes on this disc. This happens to be a 45-line disc that we have right here. They started off 30 lines, and then they went higher and higher. And by the time that in the middle 30s, they actually were up to well over 100 lines of scan with better resolution. Some of them put actually little lenses in to capture more light. Here's our disc right here. You see right here where the light is shining through from behind? You can see the little holes in our disc right there. So when we got it, here's what it looked like from the back. This mechanism was inside the cabinet. Here's this neon light. And then down at the bottom of the cabinet is this receiver, not for audio. There's no speaker on this thing. In fact, there's no sound at all. There's no provision for sound at all.
Move this line.
This receiver, it's a Crosley 41S modified to tune up to about 3 megahertz, and the output stage is modified to drive this lamp. Originally, this came with a push-pull 45, the original receiver, which would drive a speaker. These would be in push-pull. The receiver is rewired, so these are now in parallel. They don't drive a speaker anymore. The output goes right to the neon lamp. No sound, no audio. If you want sound, another radio, you tune it to a different station.
But there was synchronous transmission of sound, according to your first slide.
There was.
Yeah, on a different frequency.
Okay, here's actually what this lamp looks like, and the lamp, the inside of the lamp there's a lot of deposits on it, and so the lamp is no longer useful. I tried running with the lamp. You can barely see it in a dark room, it is so dim. So in place of the lamp, what I've done is put in an LED array. So let's talk about bandwidth. How is it that they were able to transmit these signals in the broadcast band? The ordinary TV, the NTSC that we don't have anymore, takes about 4 megahertz bandwidth, so they put those up in much higher frequencies. The bandwidth required for these mechanical signals is in the audio range. In fact, I'm going to show you, when I demonstrate this thing, those video signals are in the audio range can actually be recorded on a record. And in 1928, Baird in England did it. I got some of those recordings, and we'll actually be able to see
Video discs.
some of those very first video recording done in 1928 on an acoustical recording lathe, not even electronic. It was an acoustical recording lathe. That's how primitive it was. What we have here is a 45-line system. This takes about a 12 kilohertz bandwidth for here, a little bit high for the broadcast band. But, so what they did is they pushed the frequencies. In fact, the FRC, well, I'll come back to that in just a minute on where they went with that. But the thing is, that these transmissions were being done down in the broadcast band. So there was a real opportunity for TVDX. For several hundred miles, down the broadcast band, people were receiving these signals several hundred miles away and putting up their receivers so they could view these transmissions. So the bands that were allocated by the FRC, remember before the FCC came along in 1934, but the FRC said, okay, we're not gonna put these signals in the broadcast band, we're gonna put it up just above the broadcast band. So they allotted 5 channels, starting at 2 megahertz up to almost 3 megahertz. And the receiver part of this tunes that frequency range, 2 to 3 megahertz. This allowed, and each one of these bands is 100 kilohertz wide, and so for double sideband transmission is what they were using back then. Then they could modulate up to 50 kilohertz video frequency, which was sort of limiting them to 40, 50, 60 line type transmission. Okay, so what was on the air in 1931? Here are you probably won't be able to read this, but here are all the broadcasters at that time broadcasting in these frequency range. This is the 2 megahertz, the 2.1, and so on, all the way down to the top of these bands. They were all running between about 30 and 45, 50 line definition signals, and most of them were on the East Coast. There were a couple in Chicago, but there was really none of this going on here in the western part of the United States back at that point.
Everybody supported their own system, I gather, from the...
Pretty much. That's right, pretty much. 45 line systems, 48 line systems, 60 line systems, and so on. Now what Hill was hinting at is synchronization. There wasn't any back then. There was no sync signals on these video signals. So because this was all mechanical, the motor at the receiver had to match the speed of the motor at the transmitter. And if you're the local power line and you're using a synchronous motor, this system used a synchronous motor, and many systems did not use synchronous motors. So they were not locked to the power line. So you had to adjust to the motor speed by hand to get it in sync. And the picture would wobble like that. And if you get a few seconds, I mean, this was not for entertainment, obviously. These were the crystal sets of 1930.
I like those kind of things.
And, if you could get a few, like people back in the early days of our television, if you saw a test pattern of snow, I mean, you could look at that for a long time.
I guess mostly it was just static images that they were transmitting at that time.
No, they were, by static images, they were test patterns back
Yeah,
then. But there were real
motion.
attempts at entertainment.
They just had motion.
Okay.
But
if you're going like this,
things like that.
it's going to be hard to...
So if you were using one of these machines that had a synchronous motor, and you were lucky enough to be on the same power system, and back then we didn't have the universal power systems that we do today. The U.S. is broken up, I think, into about 3.1 different power systems, where they're all the same phase in each one of these power systems. We're part of the Western distribution system. We're all the same phase. That wasn't the case back then. So if you were lucky enough to be close, then you could synchronize. But if not, your picture would move around. Synchronism, actually Farnsworth actually held the first sync patents, and of course RCA wanted them, and the wars went on. Sarnoff, they went up destroying Sarnoff to get those patents. Here are some advertisements. Well, in fact, even QST, our favorite ham magazine, had a lot of TV articles back then. Here's an article in 1920, I can't even read, 1928, September 1928, article in QST on synchronism. Here's just an advertisement of one of these motors. The Villasat is produced by Western Television Corporation, established in 1928 in Chicago. And they acquired Echophone. People remember the Echophone string? That was the manufacturing arm of Western Television, later on acquired by Hal Crafters, who was then eaten by somebody else and finally disappeared. And the brains behind this was Sanabria. He's a Chicagoan. He patented interlacing in 1929. The interlacing on this set is unique on the VisionNet. It's a triple interlace system. It's not a progressive scan. It's not a double interlace system, which our 525 line system was. This is a triple interlace system. The idea is that you try to reduce the overall flicker by having the triple interlaced. So as the wheel goes around, there's actually 3 sets of spirals on this. Every time the wheel goes around, there's actually 3 different line sets that will present to the tube. So they began transmissions in Chicago. So I'm a Chicago boy myself, and I do remember these stations, WCFL at 1000. The audio was transmitted on another frequency by W9XAP. These are what the calls were back then. Remember the experimental calls all had an X in them back up until fairly recently. WMAQ Chicago finally acquired that station. That's NBC 670 in Chicago. These experiments went on until about 1933, and so these sets became obsolete. There were no transmissions available for these sets to look at. Okay, so what we're doing now is I'm restoring basically the electronics of the VisionNet. Philip and Carlos are doing the cabinet, and when we get it all, and by the way, John Stewart is also involved because there are some rubber supports that had deteriorated that John is actually milling together. He actually milled some forms, and he's actually making a whole new set of rubber supports for this thing that support the mechanism back into the cabinet. So when we get it all put back together, we'll have it working as it was, except the electronics is going to be different. I've replaced the Kino lamp with an LED array. The electronics that drives it is modern electronics. There's a little video generator, and you'll see that in just a second, that puts out an NTSC signal, and then a scan converter that converts that 525 line to the 45 line video for the thing. Here's what it looks like. Here's the LED array. It's a 4x6 array of LEDs. It's driven by a LED driver and format converter. There's a fellow out near Detroit named Daryl Hawk that makes these things. Richard bought one that's a universal. It can translate anything into anything. PAL, it does color, any of the mechanical standards. And Richard is using these on his mirror screw, the 60-line mirror screw, which I hope he can sometime bring that one in and demonstrate for us. It's a really work of art that Richard has done there. There's a cheaper version of that we're using here, which doesn't do everything this does, but it does what's required to produce that 45-line picture. And this little guy, this little Mica device, takes a standard SD card or a thumb drive and just puts out 525-line video. It's just a nice little gadget that then drives this, which then drives that. There's a remote that you can select the different programming. So the programming.
Question, are you just taking a line for sync, or are you powering the motor from the electronic source?
We're using line sync, and let me back up one. I'm using line sync for the motor, and this thing here also uses line sync, so I've got line going into the sync input on this thing. Okay, so this driver is using 60 hertz line sync and the motor, so they are synced together. Okay, that's where the sync, the video sync comes from. Okay, so I put together some programs for this to kind of show it at its best, because this is a tiny little picture. It's 1 inch wide and 1.5 inches high. Little tiny picture. And so what I did is I went and got the Seaboat Willie. This is Disney's first sound cartoon from 1928. And this is what really made Disney famous. This is I selected this one. First of all, it's actually, if you've ever gone through it, it's really a great little cartoon. It's got all sorts of humor in it. It's line image with motion, and motion really makes it. If you just look at the static image, you know, it's not interesting. But when you see motion at this low resolution, motion really adds a lot to the effect. I mean, just looking at a static image, motion really adds to that. The next thing I did was I took clips from Casablanca. There's all the head shots. That's all this is really good for this resolution. So this is grayscale with motion, and this thing does grayscale very nicely. And then I have some static test patterns. This is the 1939 Indian head pattern that RCA came up with when they were developing their high definition television systems. So they're all three on here, and I will start this in just a moment. And one of the things that Mike mentioned that I made my own scanner a number of years ago. And I made my own scanner to look at these original recordings from Baird, 1928. Baird is the Englishman, he's actually a Scotsman over in Great Britain, that pioneered mechanical television in England. And in the development of that, he was very crude. This is a 30-line, 12.5 frames per second images. What he did is he actually recorded, because the video is within the range of the audio, we actually made recordings on records, 12-inch records, and these records were rediscovered a few years ago. A fellow by the name of Don McLean in England managed to recover the video from these recordings from Baird. What this is, it's a very heavily made up face sort of moving back and forth in front of the scanner. I took these and reconverted them for my own scanner, and I made my scanner so I could actually view this history. Here is the scanner that Baird, it's called a televisor. A very popular unit in England. It's a real collector's item here. This is the televisor. It's vertical scanning. In fact, this is a 30-line image scanned from the bottom, 12.5 frames per second. And so these are part of the program that I put together for our scanner. This is my scanner. Here's a picture from it. I've also built an iconoscope camera a while back. This is the iconoscope tube itself. Just some shots of this fully NTSC signal, by the way. And so this is a picture looking out my back window of my ham shack, being displayed on my big 65-inch Samsung television from this iconoscope camera. Here's the camera control unit right here. Here's the Indian head being photographed for that. And at the same time, also some history. Boy, that doesn't show. They're not. There's a problem up here.
Moray.
This Moray pattern. These are cameras from the early 40s. This is another iconoscope camera that I've recovered, and an image orthicon camera that I've also restored. Images without the Moray lines showing the operation of these. What we have here in the Bay Area, we have enough people. We have a kind of a critical mass of people that over 4 years ago we put together very informally Bay Area Vintage Television Group. We don't even have a formal name for it, but we've had 4 annual meetings so far. People bring their antique. These are a couple shots taken when we held it in my place. This fellow here, Matt Pendleton, he used to work for the Smithsonian. He brought a couple of pre-war televisions, 1939 electronic televisions.
Which standard are those, 411?
These were originally 441 line with AM sound, which he has converted to 525, so they will play 525. This fellow here, Jerry Goldkeep, a collector. He was on I've Got, he's a real character. He was on I've Got, remember the television program I've Got a Secret?
Yeah.
His secret was he owned more televisions than anybody else. He bought a warehouse, he just had more television than anybody else. And yes, but he's also, he used to be, now he's out of work. Do you know him?
He was in the paper. I remember reading about him.
He is a character. He is a character. Now, my last slide. I don't know if everybody knows about American Radio History website, but this is amazing. They've got hundreds and hundreds of all these different back issues of all these, and this is just part of the A's right here. Hundreds of different journals, magazines, whatever, back issues in all of this. There's thousands and thousands of stuff there. So if people don't know this site, American Radio History is just an amazing site. Anyway, so on to the demo. And so we're gonna start this guy up, and not everybody's gonna be able to see it from where they're sitting. I'm gonna put this very valuable thing.
Once John gets it going, it may be that you would want to stand up and take turns getting in front of the machine and watching through the magnifying glass. It's that
But there's a little
small
tiny,
of a screen.
there's a little
If
tiny
you would like,
image.
so it's a one at a time thing. Once it gets it going, it explains it.
The reason it's a one at a time
Yeah.
thing, you probably saw that the cabinet has a 4-inch lens. This is the same type of, not the same lens, but the same size, same focal length of lens. And once that lens is in front of where this image is, it's really a peephole, and only one person can see it at a time. So I'm not gonna mount it on there. So people come around, you can actually see it, and one person's gonna be able to hold that lens and see it. So here's how this thing works. This, first of all, you have to crank it to get started, because this motor is not self-starting. I mean, 10 years before that, half the cars had electric starts. But here in 1929, so you have to crank it and then get started. Wow. And then I have to hold it there for it to kind of catch on. And then okay. So there we are. If this LED lamp were continuous, you would see 45 pictures all the way around this periphery of this thing. Each picture is one line offset. One line shifted up and down, okay? One line shifted up and down. So this is a framing adjustment right here. In fact, it looks like I was fairly lucky. I think I probably caught it pretty well. So this, oh my God. See, it looks just like the helm of a ship. And
Each frame is going to be one line less.
And so this motor is actually on the 120 volts is going onto the motor on slip range, so it's continuously rotatable. And so what I'll do is just frame this guy in, and so there it is. And so I'll start one of the programs. I'll just start it running.
What's the image you're doing there now?
That is what you're seeing right now is what's here, which is we're still looking at this little Mika video thing. Okay, this right here. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to go into this thumb drive, which has the programs, and so I'll just get those started. Okay, so we just finished. Okay, so here we go. So this thing is what this thing is going to do. Now it's running. It's going to rotate between Casablanca. Then it's going to go to this head of 1928 recording, and then to Steamboat Willie. So I'm done, and so we're just going to leave this thing running. People come on over, take a look if you want. Then grab this, look in there, and experience 1929.
After you have done your,
We're just going to let this thing run.
we're going to let it run. So
This thing will just run fine. We'll just let it go. And
Bearings are well lubricated in that and everything.
John, I've got a quick
You're thinking about something completely different. There's no
Spanning color disc.
There is no connection between this and the CBS color system.
Wouldn't the LEDs do this quicker? Yeah, scanning.
Oh, yeah, sure. In fact, the neons are.
Every time it's a rock.
What they did is a large screen.
This is kind of an issue with the shutter speed. You could
Yeah, it's
slow
out
the
of sync.
shutter speed down, and it would just grab a whole frame, or whatever.
15 minutes for the tone. And then just turn this on. And just let it run.
It's too low, but there we go.
Well, that helps with the scale.
This will go back into the cabinet. Oh yeah, that's great.
I think that's so neat.
I mean, this whole, the frame comes off. Yeah. And it goes back into the cabinet.
This is about 1928. Where's the TV scanner? with a synchronized motor.
So it's not necessarily electrical at this point.
It's in limbo.
Not the base station, it's a module. So we had an event by the president of the
It is, yes.